So we did basically the shooting center, the equestrian center, the grass hockey, the modern pentathlon, and the archery. For the Olympics, there will be also an expark, accommodation village, and some complements for the grass hockey and for the modern pentathlon. What's built there, basically, because some of the structures for the Pan American Games were temporary, is basically the shooting center and the equestrian center, and they're practically ready for the games. They need just minor adjustments. And what's peculiar in this area is the urban context. It's like typical of Rio. You have like everything mixed together. You have a favela, you have a middle-class neighborhood, you have lush landscape, you have mountains, you have industrial area, and you have the neatly organized military village. This is like a typical suburban, and we say suburban in the Brazilian terms. It's not really like suburban housing, American housing. It's really low-income housing, and almost like, I don't know if you could call it favela technically, but it's almost, so it spreads like a carpet all over to the foothills, to the mountains, and then in the contrast with the wild landscape. Here you see very clearly the military village in the middle, with all the neatly organized pavilions and the informal settlement in the back, the shooting center on the right, and the equestrian on the left. So even in regions like Deodoro, the landscape in Rio is kind of breathtaking. In the foreground we had the archery for the Pan American Games, completely temporary. The shooting center is probably the most impressive from this area. It's a very long building, 1 kilometer long, 30,000 square meters in a 250,000 plot. Very simple. It's a spine of circulation connecting the boxes where the shooting ranges are, and they have to be on a perfect north-south orientation for sunlight reasons. So what's kind of extreme when you think that you're walking up the ramp and you're entering exactly between the line of fire. Actually, the athletes are shooting against you as you enter, which is kind of exciting but also dangerous. So you have to, a bunch of technical measures to prevent bullets from escaping from the field of play. That's just a diagram, flow circulation from front of house and back of house, accredited, public. Whatever is yellow is public and whatever is blue is fields of play. All the other colors are different operational functions. So the building is pretty much like a literal interpretation of the diagram. So extremely horizontal, makes a nice contrast against the backdrop of the mountains. And we have like a strategy which is kind of the opposite of MVRDV. We aim very low. We have learned from our experience of working with public contracts like that if we do something which is not extremely necessary, they simply won't build it. So we are kind of forced into this radical minimalism where there isn't anything which is absolutely necessary. So it's basically when the structure is ready, the architecture is there, they can't take anything away. So it's almost like destruction-proof design. So it looks like Switzerland, for instance, just like concrete and exposed concrete, wood and corrugated metal. So it has kind of an industrial look, which kind of blends with the surroundings. So it's the porch from back of house entrance. And in the section, there is a clear separation. You have the main concourse where the public is after going up the ramp, and you have all the operational functions happening underneath. So they enter the field of play directly, and the public enters separately. So it's a very technical program, very specific program, very technical issues of safety. It's kind of stark, almost bare, but it works well when the look of games, there is a competition, they wrap this up with signage and flags and stuff. So, and of course, all the equipment of the shooting, but when there's not a competition, those enigmatic baffles, almost abstract, they're designed also to prevent the glare of the sun and the shooters, and so they're 2-inch wood, so if the bullet hits there, it stays there, it doesn't ricochet or might kill someone. So we're very concerned about that. But the shooters, they don't really miss the target. You know, it's like almost frustrating. And on the inside, this is the only venue, which is the only stand which has air conditioning. It has to be for technical requirements. It's a huge 10-meter range. It was also used for the fencing competitions in the Pan American Games. So it's very simple, modulated structure. It's from waist down, it's prefab concrete. And from waist up, it's steel frame structure. So sometimes we try to frame the landscape and transparencies and give light and air to these areas, the transitional areas, VIPs. And of course, the beautiful landscape of Rio, where you can appreciate from the terrace. And that's the main grandstand for the trap and skeet with a kind of different shooting. So they're shooting actually against the highway, so it's kind of scary. And the walls that brings the two separate buildings together as a whole. So in the back of that we'll have the X-Park, and the X-Park site it's more like completely, there's nothing there, no infrastructure, and it will have the whitewater, canoe slalom, the BMX, and the mountain bike. So it's more like landscape rather than architecture, this one. So an overall view on the shooting and the X-Park back there, and in the middle we'll have the swimming pool for the modern pentathlon and the grass hockey fields. And for the Olympics there will be a major transformation. What was the archery will become the modern pentathlon venue with a new arena for the fencing. So it's pretty much the same language from the shooting. We wanted them to be kind of a family. So despite the distance, there is a kind of unity in language, and also, of course, it makes constructions faster and easier. It took us a year and a half to design this, and only 6 months to build the entire thing, actually. So that's the equestrian center. So everything costs $50 million, which is not much. So that's why the strategy is to try to replicate some of the solutions whenever possible, because the functions sometimes are very similar. So the arena from the equestrian, it's exactly the same as the arena from the trap and skeet. We just moved it here. So that's the temporary structures that come with the Olympics. It's a different requirement from the Pan American Games. So those are temporary seats around, and the main grandstand with 1,200 seats. The big span, 30 meter, being supported by the steel rods in the back. So it's really simple. It has to be. It's a military area, so we can't really be designing icons or very flashy buildings. Those guys are almost like Spartan. And the stables, basically a 5-star hotel for horses. This probably cost like 1 million reais, that little horse there. And inside there is insulation, cross ventilation, so it's kind of a green building hotel for horses. And the nice obstacles. Actually, this is one of the nicest sports that I've seen in the Olympics, which is the cross country. It's very exciting. You can just be here and waiting for the horse to jump. You can make like a picnic on the lawns and be really close to the athletes. So we're very fortunate to have this site, because it has, natural wood, so we could map out the track on that. So in the end, the main challenge is to how to connect those islands, those separate venues, to become really a cluster. It has to be linked, so this kind of green boulevard will be used as front of house operation for the spectators, and later on as a boulevard, like a public space. And all the infrastructure improvements for the Pan American Games and for the Olympics will serve as a sort of an opportunity to increase development in this area, improve the quality of life. So in the Olympic bid, we were hired in 2008 to work for the Olympic Committee. So we were the only architectural practice involved in this, which for us was almost unbelievable. So we did pretty much most of the concept studies together with the operational team from the committee. At some point they had more than 500 people working on that. Of course the architectural part is just like a tiny part of that. The bid is not an architectural competition, although Rio was competing with Tokyo, Chicago and Madrid. It has many more issues like transportation, infrastructure, security, and lodging and hotels. So this strategy, both for the Pan American Games and the Olympic Games, is to group the venues in 4 clusters. The idea is to spread the benefits of the games throughout the city. So according to the characteristics, they would choose certain types of venues to be there. So each cluster has their own character, and Baja, the main thing is about connectivity that has to be improved. It is the natural expansion area of the city. So Copacabana is like Rio as you know it, so Baja is very, very far away, so there will be, all those clusters will be linked with a network of BRTs and subways and also fast tracks. The triangle is the Olympic Park. On the left-hand side there is the Olympic Village and the Midi Village. So it was used for the Pan American Games. We didn't design those existing venues there, but we had to take them into account. So just a quick explanation about the front of house and back of house thing. It works for all sports venues in general. Front of house is basically who pays the tickets, the spectators, and back of house is all the other people, like security, operational, media, broadcast, athletes, delegates, everyone. So usually those flows they cannot have a conflict. So the separation happens sometimes in plant, sometimes in section, and sometimes in both. So in the Olympic Park, we try to exacerbate the separation in section. So even though we treat the entire site as kind of a campus, as a green field, the 2 main axes, north and south, they have to be because of sunlight reasons. So it kind of makes the display of the fields of play in a very organized way. So you have the front of house now also in a suspended platform where they can access without having to have any conflict with the operational flows. So basically this will be treated with a kind of a landscape, and as for the legacy, it's a public space, or actually the rest of the area where temporary structures are going to be developed and become almost like a neighborhood with some kind of sports facilities within it. So there is also the advantage of suspending these 6 meters. Apart from the logistics advantages, there is also a possibility of having a glimpse of the lagoon and a glimpse from the field of play. Even if you're not entering to that particular sport, you can watch it from that up there on the platform. So in section makes it kind of clear to understand. And of course, this is an operational planning. It's very complex. We had to deal with 40 different sports, each with their own kind of sets of rules, and all the international federations actually have to sign this off. to make sure that they work. So it's the committee's job to deal with the federations and explain to them to a certain level. It's kind of very detailed, although it's a schematic. And our job was pretty much to produce the design to a certain level that could make it easy for them to visualize, the potential of the site. It doesn't mean it's going to be like that, but they could believe that there was enough space and quality for all the new venues. So the afternoon before simulations have the purpose of convincing them that it's like a clear way of organizing all the entrances. And here you see the platform landscape with a fields of play in the back, tennis center, and the international broadcast center, media press center, the aquatics, and the indoor training center. So another afternoon before situation, those buildings on the left, I mean, this is just an attempt to put all the 30,000 news people and media people in there, but of course, in an urbanistic sense, it doesn't make sense. So later on, it moved to the city center. So they're trying to make those to be sold as apartments afterwards, so it become a kind of legacy to try to stimulate people to go back to the center. And here you had like a intermodal, multimodal bus and BRT station. Then you would connect directly to the Olympic site over the traffic. So the Rio Centro is an exhibit center. It's going to be used for some indoor sports as well. And on the left-hand side, we have the site of the Olympic Village, which is where the Rock in Rio happens, in fact. But it belongs to a contractor. Private company is going to be a PPP, so they did those buildings on the right. We didn't design them. It's like typical condos from Baja. Our job was to integrate that with the international zone on the left, which is the amenity area for the athletes. So it's mostly a landscape project at this point. So just a view of the incredible 30-kilometer stretch of beach. It's never ending. And in the Maracanã, we didn't do much here actually. The Olympic Stadium is going to be, it wasn't designed by us, it was built for the Pan American Games here. So we'll have the first Olympic Park without the Olympic Stadium, which is not ideal. And then the Maracanã in a very congested area surrounded by high density. So it's not also an ideal situation. When it was built in the 50s, it's far away, but then the city just got around it. And also, this is the samba venue. The carnival parades happen here. Actually, most people don't know, but all the parades happen in a kind of sports venue, which is ironic. It's very disciplined. It's almost like an army parade, very organized. Of course, there are parties in town, but all the parades that you see on the pictures on TV, they happen here. So this is Oscar Niemeyer's project. It's going to be finished because one site was not built at the time. So it's going to be the final for the marathon. We will end up here in that kind of McDonald's arch. And the archery also is happening here. So the focus here on Maracanã cluster is mostly urban renovation. There is a big program from the city in the port area. There's the Calatrava Museum, a bunch of other improvements. They're destroying a bunch of bridges and bringing the traffic down to bring the port and the ocean back to the city. So it's a pretty ambitious project. And so the Olympics was a kind of a pretext to finally start this ongoing dream of Rio of renovating the central area. Going to Copacabana, so the main characteristics is, of course, environmental remediation and the beautiful landscape. So this is Rio as we know it. The city squeezed between the mountains and the sea. So it's extremely dense, and you can see the Corcovado shadow here. Peak and the Sugarloaf here. This is Copacabana Beach and Ipanema and Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas. It's a beautiful landscape, so it's going to be fantastic to have, for instance, the sailing here and the yacht club. The Flamengo Park, one of my favorite urban projects ever. It's absurd, something that would have never been possible today. They literally chopped up an entire hill or a little mountain that was in downtown. They cut it and they pushed the land to the sea to reclaim this land. So before, the water used to actually hit the buildings there. So now it's a landfill with this beautiful park by Brazilian landscape Bruno Campos. So it's a very lively place where you have like activities there, like 24 hours. People are playing soccer at midnight or 2 in the morning. It's crazy. So it's the perfect scenery for those outdoor spaces, and they actually, anyone can go there and be right next to these events without paying tickets. So the beach volleyball is going to be a temporary structure in Ipanema. So that's a perfect scenery. You have the Sugarloaf in the back. I mean, it's quite different to have a beach volleyball actually here in the beach rather than, London. And here you have the end also the famous fort of Copacabana. We have the finals of the triathlon and marathon, swimming marathon. So I think this is one of the best parts of all the Olympics, is to be able to just be there and see it all happening, and the crowd supporting the athletes. It's going to be very exciting. You have really the feeling of the games and participating in the life of the city. So turning around Arpoador, we finally get to the Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas, where the canoe will happen. There is a temporary pontoon with a finish line, and it was barely the enough size to fit the track. So now finally the Mineirão Stadium. So we were hired in 2010 to be responsible for the renovation in a kind of design-build PPP, private and public partnership. So the Minas Arena Consortium, which is our client, they're going to be responsible for the stadium for the next 25 years. So in this case, it's a kind of different. It's not a traditional public project. So I think it's worth saying that the next World Cup will happen in a kind of a continent, not really a country. Brazil has 8 million square kilometers and 8,000 kilometers of coastline and 200 million people. So my town, for instance, the red dot there between Brasilia and Rio, and actually between São Paulo as well. So the distance between a game here in Belo Horizonte and Manaus, which is in the Amazon, is pretty much the distance between Paris and Moscow. And the distance between Porto Alegre, which is further down in south, to Manaus, is the distance between London and Cairo, or Pristina and Dubai. So the logistics will be challenging, but I think the idea, we'll also have 12 host cities instead of 6 or 7, which is the usual. But I think the idea is to also spread the benefits of having all this infrastructure investments throughout the country, instead of just concentrated in the southeast and northeast, for instance. So Mineirão, I think, has the finest location of them all. It's in the Pampulha region. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is like the cradle of Brazilian modern architecture. This is where Oscar Niemeyer started out when he was 33 years old. So he did a couple of supposed to be masterpieces from modern architecture. The little church, the old casino, the museum, the yacht club, and the Bauhaus. And Mineirão was planned more or less at the same time, not by him, but by another couple of local architects, and it's always been part of this kind of main postcards of the city. So the city was planned for 200,000 people. It's barely 100 years ago, it's very young. And it has spread to that gray area here. So now it's 3 million people, and the metropolitan region is like 5 million people. So Pampulha was a lake which was conceived by our president, J.K. I mean, at the time he was mayor, and he was later on to become president and inventor of Brasilia. So Pampulha was a kind of his first, experiment with modern architecture. So before it was kind of a secluded neighborhood, now it's really almost in the center of the city. So if you look at the FIFA textbook, Mineirão is almost like a perfect example of where a stadium should be located. It has an airport right next to it, 2 major arteries in the north and the south, lots of space around. This is an university and a lake, a low-density area. As opposed to the Maracanã Stadium, which was, suffocated by all the congestion around. Mineirão is actually in one of the lowest densities of the city. So apart from that, there is also a gymnasium in front and a club that belongs to the university. So this is a kind of potential synergy between the equipments, which is also very nice. So the little church, Nehemiah Church, is right here. So it's really close. So the churches, so this classical postcard from the city with the Serra do Carro Monte in the back, and the lake, and the church. So one of the challenges is topography in the city, because we're up in the mountains. So the outside area, which is this kind of stepped plaza around the stadium, actually before it was a completely inhospitable parking lot. You can see the steep topography here. We have 15 meters difference from one side to another. So before it was basically a parking lot. So this is a picture from 1965, where the stadium used to hold 130,000 people, which is crazy. And the city has 2 very good soccer teams, and they attracted back also, I think in the 70s, 125 people for a local championship. So this is never going to be like a feared white elephant. It's going to be very, very used. But the idea is to transform the stadium, beyond its primary role as a football stadium into a multifunctional arena. You can see clearly here, the lack of spectators plaza. This is a picture where cars had colors, and actually people were entering in the middle of the traffic, which was not ideal at all. So a Google image from right before construction, and our rendering how it was going to be. So this basically almost like a shopping mall parking area will become a public plaza for the public, not really for the neighborhood or the region, but also for the city. So we have program strategically distributed, underneath the plaza and throughout the plaza in the various levels to try to activate the use of the space. Well, it's basically like an artificial topography. You see, the idea was to try not to make a kind of a building around the stadium, but really like a landscape, especially on the north and on the south areas where you entered in the same level. So quick diagrams about the flow conflicts between front of house and back of house. We separate them in a vertical way, in the same way as the Olympic Park. And so you have pedestrian suspended part and then all the back of house underneath. In this case, because of the topography, we adapt the platform to the topography and makes it kind of an extension of the urban realm. and all the secure perimeters, different modes. So we have 80,000 square meters of plaza just for the public together. And this is very important also to have the link with a gymnasium so they can both work together. So when there is an event at the gymnasium, they can use the parking space, and the other way around, and all the other facilities and amenities. Public access now is way easier, as well as evacuation. And the main entrances for entrance gates, the stairs to the parking space, and public access and service, broadcast media. So from this landscape is full of program actually. So from bottom up, we have commercial space around. We're going to have a football museum, logistics area, security, institutional areas. And as you go up, you always try to have commercial areas to attract people in all levels of the plaza and make this kind of an attraction also. Otherwise it would be just like an empty plaza. So the idea is to have them to be used for events and various kinds, like concerts and small parties, fairs, whatever. And also we have very limited condition of landscaping because we have to keep it clear around the stadium for safety, crowd control, and we're talking about 60,000 people around the stadium, and also we need all the temporary structures that is going to be set up for the World Cup around the stadium as well. So we were kind of making this very limited to the board kind of plazas in a more human scale, so people could have a glimpse also of the lagoon and water, a little bit of shade, and all the functions. So that's the final idea of having these ramps together with stairs and tilted surfaces and all this program spread around, and in a kind of amphitheater configuration in the south. So we would have almost as if the street is entering through the plaza. So there isn't this just sidewalk and then you're entering. There isn't really a limit, unless for the fence, which keeps for some kind of control. So the commercial area, or the platform, is already built, and the landscape here, I'm going to mention it later on. We had the same issues we were discussing about how deep the earth can be, and the weight of the water, things like that. They didn't allow us to have any kind of proper landscape. So we have big phases, basically. But even then, they asked us to place the vases on top of every column, so we could only have a tree every 10 meters, which is the model of the prefab concrete structure. But so we try to compensate that by using water fountains and having like some facilities, commercial as well. Inside, the transformation is also complete, very unhealthy and safe and comfortable before, and people didn't have proper sight lines. I mean, you could barely see the heels of the players here, very distant from the pitch as well. Crowd accumulating in the stairs, conflict with cars. So the new addition, we're adding actually 200,000 square meters of program, lowering the pitch, approximating and getting closer to the 10 meters closer, and making an extension of the roof, also 28 meters, covering every seat. So it's a complete new stadium. The structure is heritage listed, so we had this limit of having to preserve the top of the slab, and also those 88 semi-porticos, which are structural, kind of brutalist architecture of the time. But the city is 100 years old, so a structure from 1965 is already kind of old. So rainwater and reuse and solar panels, sustainability has become almost like a requirement. There is a FIFA Go program, but we have very strong limits because we're dealing with an existing structure. So we're basically ticking the boxes to have like LEED certification. So an overall view of the platform around, completely new world-class stadium. The program underneath go very fast. Now it's just a competition area. This is basically like that in every stadium. So they're quite similar FIFA program. So you have hospitality, skyboxes, VIPs, and restaurants and public toilets and food and beverage. The entrances for public and hospitality separated, and more skyboxes and a broadcast TV broadcast area, the venue operations center, another kind of panoramic restaurant on the back south. So going up, food and beverage, and the main general public, and roof, existing roof, solar panels. So rendering from what it was going to be and the build stuff, so it's quite similar. Another one from the main tribune where we have the press, the media press, and all the VIP skyboxes. And this was a photo I took in last game, Brazil versus Uruguay. It's quite similar. Another before and after situation, the platform molded to the topography. So you see the stadium is kind of compact, and if you compare them with a stadium from Brasilia, for instance, or the Maracanã Stadium, Mineirão is even small, and with a big capacity. So it costed $300 million. So if you think that it has 350,000 square meters of built surface, it's not that much actually, and you have this kind of blends in the landscape with its proportion, but it also has wide spaces around it from that broadcast compound, and the main entrance from the south with a commercial area and shops. You can take a shortcut through the stairs or keep walking the ramp, have a glimpse of the stadium, and reveals itself. That was before, just when it was a parking lot. So transformations, radical. Now we have a program around it. So most of the stadiums in Brazil were kind of like this. So I've been there many times. It was not really very friendly. You couldn't really take, your girlfriend or kids. Kind of dangerous. And now we have a completely different kind of stadium, not just Mineirão, but all of them. So there was quite an improvement. So this, for instance, the same entry gate and the same position. So now you completely have space around it. So this is one of our squares, so to speak. So there are supposed to be trees here. I don't know if you can see those sticks. That was the best that the consortium could get. So I hope that in 50 years there will be trees growing in there. And so those big vases of 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter, they can have medium-sized trees to provide some kind of shade to stimulate people to stay there and enjoy the view of the lake. Another shot from another gate entrance, and the complete transformation to access level -1. And also accessibility is a challenge here because at that time it was not really an issue. Now we have to make big ramps to bring the wheelchair and disabled people to lower levels. And signage is another great thing that was practically non-existent in Brazil. And in this case, it improved a lot, since the building is also very stark. So those bright colors that Hardy Design that works with us, they did. It makes not only functional, but it makes it beautiful in contrast with the rough and texture of the brutalist concrete. So you see those lots of colors, and it's very nice. So also the stairs, the seats we chose to like different colors of gray, dark gray, light gray, and deep gray. So you have this kind of pixel effect. So the idea is to have a neutral background, not just for the signage and the wayfinding, but also for the crowd when they come. You know, the stadium becomes the color of the crowd. So in this case it was blue. So it's lots of technical requirements and IT stuff. It's unbelievable the amount of cables, and they change, very dynamic technology. Everything has to be exposed. And this is the VIP lounge, but even here, you know, you have to keep things kind of simple. Before, very claustrophobic areas, corridors, and now complete transformation. Everything was rebuilt inside. So that was the locker room, and how it is now. And this picture is, I like to show you because when something is not well kept and maintained, and the tendency is like to keep destroying the thing. So with a nice renovation, and the public is now appreciating more, you know, and respecting, and actually enjoying being in a completely renewed stadium. So signage, it's a big issue for crowd control, and for functions, and every operation has a different way of taking people to part. So you need some flexibility in those cases, another after and before situation. I mean, and for panic control, so it's very easy to get around the stadium. And on the inside, we have very good sight lines from anywhere. That's how it was before. So those were the seats where people were staying, actually, just staying, no seats at all. And the complete transformation, the new structure of the roof. The roof before was kind of beautiful, this plain slab, you know, because the inverted structure was on top. But this solution that the engineer came up was very practical and allowed us to use actually the original structure. So it's a kind of mixed, structure with the steel frame and the concrete working together. Because at the time people really knew how to build with concrete in Brazil. So it's not like the Maracanã Stadium that they ripped off the roof and they made a completely new high-tech roof. So this is more a simple solution in terms of, and definitely different aesthetics, but it was kind of more appropriate to the stadium that had such a good concrete structure. So before, how it was, you know, the arena kind of cozier because of the new roof and approaching to the pitch. This was also shot during the Brazil and Uruguay game. On the outside, of course, so people really appreciate this great leap of quality that Brazilians say, because soccer fans in Brazil, they've been living with this, you know, outraging conditions in stadiums for such a long time. And now people started bringing their families again, and kids, and girlfriends, wives. And so there is no doubt that, you know, this is going to completely transform the experience of going to a game. So this has even increased the amount of people who go watching games. Every game now has a big audience because, you know, people are curious also to watch the new stadiums, and this is for all of them. On the outside, recent process last week, of course, it's not people that they were not really complaining about the stadiums quality or costs. They were kind of complaining, you know, all right, we have the stadiums, they're very good, they're world-class stadiums, but what about the rest? So they were starting, we want also like FIFA standards, roads, we want FIFA standards, hospitals, we want FIFA standard, infrastructure, FIFA standard, airports, FIFA standard, public transport, all those issues that are supposed to come as a legacy from all this investment. Because the World Cup is just like 15 days, and after this, what's gone, what's left as a legacy for the cities, for the country. So I think those guys summed it up by saying we want a FIFA standard Brazil. That's it.